Zixthrax shifted uncomfortably in his observation pod, his four eyes blinking in rapid succession as he watched the human warship through the long-range sensors. As a senior member of the Galactic Council's Military Assessment Division, he had observed many species over his 300-year career. But humans were different. The Earth Defense Force flagship, Normandy, moved with an unpredictable pattern that made his antennae twitch. At its tactical console stood Lieutenant Alice Murphy, a female human whose actions had caught his attention over the past few weeks. She wasn't following any of the standard combat protocols used by the other 37 spacefaring races. Most irregular, he muttered, recording another note in his report. Subject continues to implement random course changes without apparent tactical necessity. Through his view screen, he watched as the Normandy conducted what humans called battle drills. Their ships would form up in traditional attack patterns, only to break formation in ways that seemed chaotic and meaningless. Yet somehow they would emerge in perfect firing positions. In the command center of the Normandy, Lieutenant Murphy was running her crew through another simulation. Enemy vessels approaching from Vector 317, she announced, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Standard Drachnid attack formation. The bridge crew responded with practiced efficiency, but their actions made Zixthrax's scales itch. Instead of maintaining a defensive position, as all logical military doctrine suggested, they scattered like startled prey animals. Yet each ship's seemingly random movement was precisely calculated. They're treating space like an ocean, Zixthrax realized with growing concern. They're applying their primitive naval warfare techniques to space combat. He had studied Earth's military history as part of his assignment. Humans had spent centuries fighting on their water-covered world, developing tactics that no other species had ever considered necessary in the age of space travel. The simulation continued as Lieutenant Murphy introduced a new element. Asteroid field detected, bearing 240. A smile crossed her face as she input new commands. All ships, execute Operation Hornet's Nest. Zixthrax watched in horror as the human vessels darted into the asteroid field. Every known tactical doctrine declared asteroid fields as zones to be avoided during combat. The risks were too high, the variables too numerous to calculate. Yet the human ships weaved through the floating rocks with practiced ease, using them as cover. Council member Zixthrax, his communication unit chimed. The High Council requests your preliminary report on human military capabilities. He stared at the scenes before him. The Normandy was now leading a complex maneuver that involved using the gravitational fields of larger asteroids to alter their trajectory without using engines. It was elegant, efficient, and completely terrifying. Respected Council, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I must advise immediate reclassification of human military potential. They are not following any known tactical protocols. They appear to be. He paused, searching for the right words, improvising. On the Normandy's bridge, Lieutenant Murphy was explaining her latest strategy to Captain Frank Miller. If we position our ships here, and here, she pointed to various spots on the tactical display, we can use the asteroid field's natural movement to create a three-dimensional trap. When the enemy follows us in, thinking we're retreating, they'll be surrounded before they realize it. The captain finished, nodding appreciatively. Just like the old submarine warfare tactics. Zixthrax's report continued as he observed their planning session through long-range sensors. Humans are adapting their historical warfare methods to space combat. They view space not as a void to be crossed, but as terrain to be utilized. They speak of high ground in space, create choke points where none naturally exist, and treat asteroid fields as their forests and mountains. The Council's response was quick and concerned. Surely they cannot maintain such irregular tactics in actual combat conditions. Before Zixthrax could respond, alarms blared across his observation pod. 3 Drachnid scout ships had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the human exercise zone. The Drachnids, notorious for their aggressive expansion, had been probing human space for weeks. What happened next made Zixthrax's report change from concern to urgent. Lieutenant Murphy didn't hesitate or call for instructions. She immediately ordered her ships to execute a maneuver that appeared to be a panicked retreat. The Drachnid ships, following standard pursuit protocols, formed up in a perfect wedge formation and charged after the fleeing humans. They followed the Normandy and its escort ships directly into the asteroid field. By the first stars, Zixthrax whispered as he watched the trap unfold. The human ships suddenly split apart, each taking a different path through the asteroid field. The Drachnid formation, trying to maintain their textbook pursuit pattern, was forced to split up. Moments later, the humans emerged from different directions, surrounding the now separated Drachnid vessels. Lieutenant Murphy's voice carried across the command channel. All ships, execute firing pattern Delta. Let's show our visitors why you don't corner a human. The resulting battle was brief but decisive. The human ships fired from multiple angles, using the asteroids as cover between shots, never staying in one place long enough to become a target. The Drachnid ships, designed for formal space combat with their heavy forward shields, were helpless against attacks coming from all directions. Within minutes, all 3 Drachnid vessels had surrendered. Not one had been destroyed. Another surprise to Zixthrax. The humans had disabled their engines and weapons with surgical precision, something that went against every aggressive tendency he'd expected from such a young species. Update to previous report. Zixthrax transmitted to the Council, his appendages shaking slightly. Humans have just demonstrated their tactical theories in actual combat. Results exceed all projected models. They are not simply adapting their historical warfare methods to space. They are rewriting the fundamentals of space combat itself. He watched as the Normandy's crews efficiently secured the Drachnid vessels. Lieutenant Murphy was already conducting a debrief with her tactical team, analyzing every detail of the engagement for future improvement. Most concerning of all, Zixthrax concluded his report, is that this appears to be just the beginning. Humans are treating these encounters as learning experiences. They are not merely fighting. They are evolving their tactics in real time. As he finished his transmission, he heard Lieutenant Murphy's voice one last time over the monitoring channels. Good work, everyone. But remember, these were just scouts. When the real fight comes, we'll need every trick in humanity's long history of warfare. And maybe a few new ones we haven't invented yet. Zixthrax added a personal note to his report. The Galactic Council has grossly underestimated humanity's military potential. Their perceived primitive nature is not a weakness. It is perhaps their greatest strength. They are not bound by 10,000 years of standardized space combat doctrine. They are free to innovate, adapt, and overcome in ways that our civilization has long forgotten. He took one last look at the Normandy before engaging his pod stealth systems. The human ships were already back in formation, running new battle drills, implementing lessons learned from the brief skirmish. They'd moved with a confidence that sent chills down his spine. May the first stars help us all, he whispered, if we ever have to face them in actual war. Commander Peter Wright stood at the viewport of Earth Defense Force Station Delta, watching the stars with a troubled expression. The latest reports from the outer colonies weren't good. The Drachnid Empire had responded to the capture of their scout ships with overwhelming force, sending 3 full battle fleets toward human space. Sir, his communication officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from an unusual source. It's coming from the Crimson Nebula. Peter raised an eyebrow. The Crimson Nebula was notorious as a haven for space pirates, outcasts who refused to follow the Galactic Council's laws. Put it through, he ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a woman with fierce eyes and a confident smile. Commander Wright, I'm Catherine Bennett, though most folks out here know me as Star Fox. She leaned forward, her image shimming slightly. I hear you've got a Drachnid problem. In his observation pod several light years away, Zixthrax watched this exchange with growing anxiety. Impossible, he muttered into his recorder. Humans are attempting to negotiate with pirates. This violates all known diplomatic protocols. But the conversation continued. Peter studied the pirate leader carefully. The Drachnids are everyone's problem. Captain Bennett. They'd broken 3 peace treaties in the last month alone. Catherine nodded, which is exactly why I'm calling. My fleet may not be as pretty as your military ships, but we know every hiding spot and secret route in this sector. And we got scores to settle with the Drachnids. Peter's tactical mind was already racing with possibilities. The pirates' knowledge of hidden spaces and unconventional tactics could be exactly what they needed. But there was one problem. The Galactic Council would never approve of this alliance. Catherine's laugh was sharp and clear. Since when do humans care what those old fossils think? They'd been watching us all fight and die out here for centuries while they debate proper protocol. In his pod, Zixthrax bristled at the insult, but he couldn't deny its truth. The Council's dedication to proper procedures had often prevented timely responses to crises. Very well, Peter said after a moment's thought. But we do this by some rules. No civilian targets, no unnecessary destruction. Agreed, Catherine replied instantly. My people may be pirates, but we're not monsters. Besides, she grinned, the Drachnids have much better stuff to steal. Over the next few days, Zixthrax watched in amazement as human military vessels began joint training exercises with pirate ships. The pirates' vessels were a mix of stolen and modified craft from a dozen different species, each uniquely customized for their needs. They're combining military precision with pirate unpredictability, he reported to the Council. The results are disturbing. In the main hangar of Station Delta, Peter and Catherine stood before a holographic map of the sector. The Drachnids expect us to defend here, here, and here. Peter pointed to the main colony worlds. They'll be ready for conventional military resistance. Catherine nodded, manipulating the map to show different routes between the stars. But they don't know about these smuggling routes. We've been using them for years to avoid patrols. Some run through dimensional rifts, others through areas the Drachnids consider too dangerous to travel. Speaking of dangerous, Peter added, I hear your engineers have some interesting modifications to share. Catherine's eyes lit up. Oh yes, you military types aren't the only ones who can innovate. We've figured out how to mask our engine signatures by mixing different fuel types. Makes us look like space debris on most scanners. The next week was filled with intense preparation. Military crews learned the pirates' tricks for navigating supposedly impassable regions of space, while the pirates received crash courses in military coordination and tactics. Most irregular, Zixthrax noted as he watched a pirate ship successfully execute a perfect military flanking maneuver while simultaneously running with modified engines that made it nearly invisible to sensors. They are creating an entirely new form of space combat. The Drachnid fleet arrived exactly where Peter had predicted, their massive ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their commanders were confident, expecting to find human military vessels arranged in defensive positions around the colonies. Instead, they found nothing. No signs of human military presence, the Drachnid commander reported to his superiors. They appear to have abandoned their outer colonies. Then Catherine's voice crackled across all channels. Now that's where you're wrong, darling. Suddenly, ships appeared from everywhere. Military vessels burst from behind moons and asteroids, while pirate ships seemed to materialize from empty space, their masked engines finally revealing themselves. They attacked from angles the Drachnids had considered impossible to navigate. Focus fire on their command ships. Peter's voice joined Catherine's on the command channel. Remember the plan. Military ships hit their front shields, while pirate vessels strike from their blind spots. The battle that followed would be studied by military historians for years to come. The Drachnid fleet found itself caught in a three-dimensional web of attacks. When they turned to face military threats, pirate ships would strike from unexpected angles. When they pursued the nimble pirate vessels, they would run straight into military firing lines. By the first stars, Zixthrax breathed as he watched the battle unfold. They're actually winning. The Drachnid commanders tried to adapt, but their rigid tactical doctrine couldn't account for the chaos they faced. Their ships were designed for formal combat with other military vessels, not this mixture of military precision and pirate trickery. Within hours, the mighty Drachnid fleet was in retreat, leaving behind several captured vessels and a shattered sense of superiority. On the bridge of Station Delta, Peter and Catherine watched them flee. "Not bad for a bunch of outcasts and rule followers working together," Catherine said with a smirk. Peter smiled back. "The galaxy's about to learn that humanity doesn't just think outside the box. We eliminate the box entirely." Zixthrax finished his report to the council with trembling appendages. "Most esteemed council members, humans have now demonstrated the ability to not only adapt their own historical tactics to space combat, but to successfully integrate the techniques of other cultures, even those we consider criminals, into their fighting style. They view our society's divisions not as barriers but as opportunities for innovation." He watched as human military ships and pirate vessels celebrated together, sharing supplies and repair resources. "They are breaking down the very foundations of how we understand space combat and galactic society. And this may be just the beginning." In the station's tactical room, Peter and Catherine were already planning their next move. "The Drachnids will be back," Peter said seriously, "and they'll try to adapt to what we did today." Catherine's grin turned predatory. "Good thing we've got plenty more surprises ready for them. My crews are already sharing some interesting ideas about using solar flares as cover." "Fascinating," Peter replied, leaning forward with interest. "Our engineers have been working on something similar with magnetic field manipulation." As Zixthrax listened to them plan, he added one final note to his report. "The humans have accomplished something I previously thought impossible. They have made outcasts and lawbreakers work seamlessly with a professional military force. In doing so, they have created something entirely new. The galaxy will never be the same." Captain John Reynolds sat in the darkness of the stealth ship Shadow Dancer, watching his sensor displays with intense focus. His vessel, painted in light-absorbing black material, drifted silently through the vast asteroid field. 5 other ships from his special operations team maintained similar positions, each hidden in the shadows of different asteroids. "Status report," he whispered into his comm unit, though he knew the whisper wasn't necessary in space. Old habits from Earth's Special Forces training died hard. "All ships in position," his second-in-command responded quietly. "The Drachnid supply convoy is right on schedule." In his observation post, Zixthrax leaned forward with interest. After the disastrous battle against the combined human military and pirate forces, the Drachnids had changed tactics. They now moved their supplies in heavily armed convoys, surrounded by warships in all directions. "The humans cannot possibly attack such a well-defended target," he muttered to himself. "The convoy has 30 combat vessels protecting 5 supply ships." But Captain Reynolds had other ideas. His team had spent weeks studying Earth's ancient guerrilla warfare tactics, adapting them for space combat. They had learned from the pirates about hiding in plain sight, and from the military about precision strikes. Now they would combine all of these lessons. "Begin Operation Ghost Strike," Reynolds ordered. "Release the weather satellites." Zixthrax's antennae twitched in confusion as he watched small objects launch from the hidden human vessels. They looked like standard weather monitoring satellites, the kind used on primitive worlds to track storms. But these had been modified. The satellites activated, releasing carefully calculated bursts of particles into space. Within minutes, a strange phenomenon began to form. An artificial nebula, created from the interaction of these particles with the natural space environment. "Impossible," Zixthrax breathed. "They're creating cover in the void of space itself." The Drachnid convoy approached the growing cloud of colorful gas and dust. Their sensors showed nothing unusual. It appeared to be a natural phenomenon, the kind commonly found in this region of space. "Shadow 3 and 4, prepare for attack run Alpha," Reynolds commanded. Shadow 2 and 5, maintain position for backup. Shadow 6, start your flanking maneuver. The Shadow Dancer and its sister ships began to move, using the artificial nebula as cover. Their black hulls, combined with the colorful gases, made them virtually invisible to both sensors and visual observation. "Sir," a Drachnid sensor operator called out to his commander, "I'm detecting some strange readings in the nebula." "Probably just mineral deposits," the commander replied dismissively. "Maintain course." That was exactly the response Reynolds had counted on. The Drachnids, like most advanced species, had become too dependent on their technology. They didn't trust their instincts anymore. "All ships, execute attack pattern Delta," Reynolds ordered. "Remember, supply ships only. We want them to waste resources protecting their convoys." The Shadow Dancer burst from the nebula like a ghost emerging from fog. Its weapons targeted the nearest supply ship with surgical precision, aiming for the engines and power systems. Before the Drachnid escort vessels could react, two more human ships appeared from different directions. "They're using the nebula like Earth's ancient forests," Zixthrax realized, frantically recording his observations. Hit-and-run tactics adapted for space warfare. The Drachnid convoy erupted into chaos. Their defensive formation, designed to repel traditional attacks, proved useless against an enemy that struck from multiple directions and then vanished back into the artificial cover. "Sir," a Drachnid officer shouted, "we can't get clear sensor readings through the nebula. The particles are interfering with our targeting systems." Reynolds smiled as he heard the intercepted communications. "Just like smoke screens in ancient warfare," he murmured. "Some tactics never go out of style." The battle continued for several minutes, but it wasn't really a battle, it was a raid. The human ships never engaged the escort vessels directly. They would emerge from cover, fire precise shots at the supply ship's vulnerable points, then disappear back into the artificial nebula before the Drachnids could lock weapons on them. "Remember," Reynolds coached his team, "we're not here to fight their fleet. We're here to make them fear every shadow in space." One by one, the supply ships were disabled, their cargo holds cracked open to the void of space. The escort vessels fired blindly into the nebula, but hit nothing. The human ships were already moving to new positions, using the asteroids and the artificial cover to mask their movements. "Fascinating adaptation," Zixthrax noted in his report. "They've taken the concept of terrain from planetary warfare and artificially created it in space. The nebula serves the same purpose as smoke screens, forests, or fog on a planet's surface." Finally, with their supply ships crippled and their cargo scattered across space, the Drachnid convoy was forced to retreat. As they limped away, Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. "All ships, begin cleanup," he ordered. "Collect the satellites before the nebula dissipates. Leave no evidence of how we did this." In his observation pod, Zixthrax was adding urgent notes to his report. "The humans have now demonstrated the ability to create tactical advantages where none naturally exist. They are not simply adapting to space warfare, they are changing the very nature of space to suit their combat needs." The Shadow Dancer and its team methodically gathered their equipment, leaving nothing behind that could reveal their methods. As they worked, Reynolds reviewed the battle data with his crew. "The artificial nebula worked better than expected," his science officer reported. "The Drachnids never realized it wasn't natural, and the particle distribution actually improved our sensor stealth capabilities." "Good," Reynolds nodded. "Next time, we'll add some electromagnetic particles to the mix. Maybe create some artificial sensor dead zones." Zixthrax's final notes for the day were filled with concern. "The humans are displaying a dangerous pattern. Each successful tactic leads them to envision 3 more. They are not merely learning from their experiences. They are using each battle as a laboratory for new innovations." Back on his ship, Reynolds was already planning the next operation. "Send word to command," he told his communications officer. "Operation Ghost Strike was a success. Request permission to begin Phase 2. multiple simultaneous raids using the new nebula tactics. As the Shadow Dancer disappeared into the darkness of space, Zixthrax added one last observation. Most troubling of all is their patience. This was not a victory in the traditional sense. No ships were destroyed, no territory was claimed. Yet the humans clearly consider it a success. They are fighting a type of war that our military doctrine doesn't even recognize. How can we defend against an enemy that doesn't follow any of the rules of warfare as we understand them? Chief Engineer Susan Carter stared at the holographic display in her laboratory aboard the research station, Bright Mind. Around her, pieces of alien shield technology floated in various states of disassembly. Her team had been studying captured Drachnid shield generators for weeks, trying to understand why they were so effective yet so power-hungry. "Look at this," she said to her assistant, pointing at the energy flow diagram. "They're treating each shield segment as a separate unit. It's like they never considered linking them together." In his observation pod, Zixthrax watched with growing concern. The humans had been given access to standard galactic shield technology as part of their integration into the spacefaring community. They weren't supposed to be taking it apart and redesigning it. "What are you thinking, Chief?" her assistant asked, seeing the familiar gleam in Susan's eyes. She pulled up an image from Earth's history. "You see this? It's called a testudo formation. Roman soldiers would lock their shields together to create better protection than any single shield could provide." Zixthrax's translator had difficulty with the ancient Earth military term, but he understood the concept as he watched the historical recreation. Soldiers creating an overlapping barrier with their protective devices. Surely they don't mean to. His voice trailed off as he realized that was exactly what they meant to do. "If we link the shield generators like this," Susan's fingers flew over the controls, creating new energy pathways. "We can make them work together instead of independently. The power load gets shared across all generators, and the shields reinforce each other." Her team worked through the night, modifying the shield generators. They removed the original control systems entirely, replacing them with a new network that allowed all shield segments to communicate and support each other. Ready for the first test, Susan announced the next morning. She looked tired but excited. "Loading power now." Zixthrax leaned forward in his pod as the humans activated their modified shield system. According to all known engineering principles, it should either fail completely or overload. Instead, a smooth, seamless barrier of energy formed around their test platform. "Power consumption is 30% lower than standard shields," one of Susan's engineers reported. "And shield strength is, this can't be right." He checked his readings again. "It's showing 40% higher than normal." Susan grinned. "Oh, it's right. When shields work together, they're stronger than when they work alone. Just like those Roman soldiers learned thousands of years ago." The test results quickly made their way up the command chain. Within days, Admiral Bill Cooper himself came to inspect the new shield system. "Can this be adapted to our larger ships?" he asked, watching another successful test. "Better than that," Susan replied. "We can adapt it to work between ships. A fleet using this system could create a shared shield wall, just like a Roman testudo formation, but on a massive scale." Zixthrax's report to the council became increasingly urgent. "The humans are not simply using our technology. They are fundamentally changing how it works based on their primitive warfare techniques. Most concerning of all, these changes appear to be improvements." The next few weeks saw frantic activity as Susan's team refined their design. They discovered that the linked shields could do more than just defend. By carefully timing the power fluctuations between shield segments, they could create directed energy pulses. "It's like ripples in a pond," Susan explained to Admiral Cooper during a follow-up demonstration. "We can make the shields resonate in specific patterns. Those patterns can disrupt enemy weapons fire or even turn it back on them." The first real test came sooner than expected. A Drachnid battle group, still searching for revenge after the guerrilla warfare attacks, detected the research station and moved to attack. Perfect timing. Susan said, her voice calm despite the approaching enemy. Let's show them what linked shields can do. The station's new shield system, activated as 3 Earth Defense Force ships, moved into position around it. Their shields linked together, creating a seamless energy barrier that encompassed all 4 structures. Impossible, the Drachnid commander muttered as his sensors tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Their shields are operating at power levels that shouldn't be sustainable. The Drachnids opened fire, their energy weapons striking the linked shield barrier. Instead of weakening under the assault, the shields seemed to grow stronger. The energy from the attacks was being distributed across the entire network, preventing any single point from being overwhelmed. They've adapted, Zixthrax whispered, watching the battle unfold. They've taken one of the most basic concepts of ancient warfare, soldiers standing together with their shields, and applied it to advanced energy shield technology. Susan's voice was steady as she directed the shield operations, initiating Resonance Pattern Alpha. All ships, synchronize your shield frequencies with the main station. The linked shields began to pulse in a complex pattern. When the next wave of Drachnid weapons fire hit, something extraordinary happened. The energy didn't just dissipate. It was caught in the resonance pattern and redirected back toward the attacking ships. By the first stars, Zixthrax breathed. They turned defensive technology into a weapon. The Drachnid ships, their own shields designed to work independently, couldn't handle their own reflected energy. One by one, they were forced to retreat, their weapons useless against the unified shield barrier. After the battle, Susan was already working on improvements. If we adjust the resonance patterns, we might be able to create shield corridors, she explained to her team. Safe passages through enemy fire that our ships can use to advance. Zixthrax's final report for the day was somber. The humans have demonstrated that our technology's greatest weakness is our assumption that we are using it correctly. They question everything, combine concepts across millennia of their history, and create new possibilities we never imagined. In her lab, Susan picked up a small piece of the original shield generator. You know what the real problem with alien technology is? She asked her assistant. They forgot that the simplest solutions are often the best. Sometimes all you need is a group of people standing together, holding up their shields. The research station buzzed with activity as more ships arrived to be fitted with the new shield systems. Engineers from across human space came to learn the new techniques, each bringing their own ideas for further improvements. The humans are not merely adapting technology, Zixthrax noted in his report. They are starting an engineering revolution. Their primitive past, which we once dismissed as irrelevant, has become the foundation for innovations that are reshaping the future of space combat. As he watched Susan begin work on yet another modification, he added one final observation. Perhaps most worrying of all is that they see this as just the beginning. In their eyes, every piece of technology we have given them is not a finished product, but a starting point for something new. The galaxy may never be the same. Colonel Richard Hayes stood on the bridge of the command ship Iron Spirit, watching as hundreds of human vessels gathered near Proxima Centauri. Every ship had been modified with Susan Carter's linked shield technology. Catherine Bennett's pirates lurked in artificial nebula created by John Reynolds' stealth team. It was time for humanity's final stand against the Drachnid fleet. All ships reporting ready, sir, his communications officer announced. The Drachnids will arrive in 30 minutes. In his observation pod, Zixthrax wasn't alone anymore. The entire Galactic Council had gathered to watch what they believed would be humanity's last battle. The Drachnids had assembled their entire battle fleet, over 1,000 ships strong. Humanity fought well, one council member said, but they cannot hope to stand against such numbers. Richard's voice came over the command channel. All ships, initiate Operation Warrior Spirit. Begin broadcasting. Suddenly, the human fleet started transmitting on all frequencies. The sound made Zixthrax's antennae quiver. It was music, ancient human war songs from every culture and era of their history. Drums thundered through space. Bagpipes wailed. Native American war chants mixed with Viking battle songs. "What are they doing?" a council member asked in confusion. Then the human ships activated their external holographic systems. Enormous images appeared on their hulls, war paint designs from Earth's tribal warriors, Nordic runes, Maori facial tattoos, ancient Chinese battle symbols. Each ship became a canvas displaying humanity's warrior heritage. "Psychological warfare," Zixthrax whispered. "They're making themselves appear as primitive and terrifying as possible." The Drachnid fleet arrived to find what looked like a gathering of spacefaring barbarians. The human ships had arranged themselves in what looked like chaos, but was actually a carefully planned formation. "Enemy vessels detected," a Drachnid commander reported. "They appear to be dancing." Indeed, the human ships were moving in complex patterns, their movements synchronized to the thunder of drums and the cry of ancient instruments. The war paint on their hulls seemed to shift and flow, creating an illusion of living warriors in space. "All ships," Richard commanded, "execute battle plan thunder." Catherine's pirate ships struck first, emerging from their artificial nebula like ghost riders. They carried modified versions of Susan's shield technology, allowing them to appear and disappear behind shifting walls of energy. The Drachnid fleet's neat formation began to break as ships turned to face threats that vanished before they could lock weapons. The thunder of drums grew louder, and more war songs filled the communication channels. "Now," Richard ordered, "show them what Earth's warriors can do." The main human fleet surged forward. Instead of breaking into smaller groups as the Drachnids expected, they stayed together. Their linked shields merged into a massive energy barrier shaped like an ancient Roman tortoise formation. "Impossible," a council member gasped. "The power requirements for a shield that size." But it wasn't just one shield. Each ship's shield reinforced the others, creating a massive moving fortress of energy. The war paint holograms made it look like a mountain of ancient warriors advancing through space, shields locked together. The Drachnid fleet opened fire. Their energy weapons struck the human shield wall and were caught in the resonance patterns Susan had designed. The attacks bounced back, amplified by the linked shields, striking the Drachnid ships with their own power. "All ships, advance to Phase 2, Richard commanded. "Show them why Earth's warriors rule the night." John Reynolds' stealth ships emerged from hiding, bringing their artificial nebula technology to new use. They created swirling clouds of particles that looked like spirit warriors dancing among the stars. The Drachnid sensors couldn't tell which were real ships and which were illusions. "They've gone mad," a Drachnid commander transmitted. "They're fighting like barbarians." "No," Richard's voice cut through all channels. "We're fighting like humans." The human fleet split into smaller groups, each still protected by linked shields. They executed complex maneuvers that looked like ancient war dances, but were actually precisely calculated attack patterns. Each movement was timed to the beat of drums and the cry of bagpipes. The Drachnid fleet's formation fell apart completely. Their commanders couldn't coordinate their ships against an enemy that seemed to ignore the laws of physics and proper space combat. Every tactic they tried was met with something from humanity's long history of warfare, adapted for space in ways that defied conventional military doctrine. "Watch closely," Zixthrax told his fellow council members. "They're not just fighting, they're putting on a show. They want this battle to be remembered." The battle reached its peak as the human ships gathered into a massive sphere formation, their linked shields creating a barrier that looked like a globe of overlapping ancient shield designs. The war paint holograms made it appear as if warriors from every human culture stood together in space, challenging the Drachnids to break their unified defense. The Drachnid fleet commander faced a choice: continue the battle against this impossible enemy or retreat. The sound of drums and war cries filled every channel. The space around Proxima Centauri was alive with swirling nebulae that looked like spirits and ghost warriors. "Full retreat," the Drachnid commander ordered. "We cannot fight an enemy we cannot understand." As the Drachnid fleet turned and fled, The human ships maintained their formation. The war songs changed to victory celebrations, but the message was clear. They were ready to fight again if necessary. In the Council observation pod, there was silence. Finally, one member spoke. "We must reclassify humanity immediately." "Agreed," another said. "They must be listed as a protected species." "Not to protect them," Sixthrax corrected. "To protect everyone else from them. They have taken everything we thought we knew about warfare and transformed it into something new. Their primitive heritage, which we once mocked, has become their greatest strength." On the Iron Spirit's bridge, Richard watched the Drachnid fleet disappear into faster-than-light travel. "Send word to Earth," he ordered. "The warrior spirit of humanity has prevailed." The human fleet began to power down their war paint holograms and shield systems. The ancient war songs faded away. But Sixthrax knew, as did every member of the Galactic Council, that the galaxy would never be the same. In trying to fight humans, he wrote in his final report, "We taught them how to wage war in space. In response, they taught us that we have forgotten the most fundamental aspects of warfare. They reminded us that combat is not just about technology and proper protocol. It is about spirit, creativity, and the willingness to draw upon every lesson learned in their long and violent history." As the human fleet prepared to return home, Richard looked out at the stars. "You know," he said to his crew, "our ancestors would be proud. We took their methods of warfare, developed over thousands of years on Earth, and used them to protect humanity among the stars." The Council voted unanimously to classify humans as a protected species, with a special note. This species has demonstrated the unique ability to combine primitive warfare techniques with advanced technology in ways that fundamentally change the nature of space combat. All species are advised to avoid military conflict with humans at all costs. Sixthrax added a personal note to the classification. The humans have not just survived their trial by fire. They have emerged stronger, more innovative, and more terrifying than ever. The galaxy must now adapt to their presence, for they have proven that no force can make them adapt to us.